Good afternoon. I'm now going to call the June work session to order. The first thing on our agenda today is requirements for the Carroll County application for the ACEP-ALE program. And Commissioners, I had a miscommunication with Dee. I thought she was just presenting this to us today and that we would vote on it at a future meeting, but it seems we have a time frame. So she'll be presenting today, and then I'll be asking to amend the agenda to put it on Tuesday, July the 9th. Yeah, July the 9th. So it does give us a little bit more time to really look at it. It's not just a short notice thing. So Dee, I'm going to go ahead and call you forward. Dee Perry, I'm going to call you forward to go over this with us.
Thank you, Commission Chair Morgan. Hello, everybody. I hope you have a good start to your summer. The Ag Advisory Committee has been very, very busy. They did complete a training with NRCS Liaison Officer to learn about the ACEP program, probably more information than they ever thought they needed to know. And we have rebuilt the application. It is now very clear, very concise. It will be uploaded to the county website in July. But what we wanted to construct, because we've never had this before, is a basic set of requirements for every landowner that shows interest. They need to understand that these are the requirements for applying. And we will, if y'all approve this, amend it, whatever, and we get an approved copy, we'll upload this to the county website as well. We are having a farmland owner information forum on August the 7th. It's the first time we've ever done that. We will have the NRCS liaison officer there, and we will also have the appraiser that we typically use there to talk to people, explain this program thoroughly to them before they apply so they kind of know what they're getting into. So what the committee has come up with for requirements, and this was also done in conjunction with the NRCS, is that the applicant must be registered with the USDA Farm Services Agency and have a farm and tract number. That is a requirement of this program. Applicant must be current on all taxes due to Carroll County. Applicant must have a farm succession plan, which is a professionally prepared will, trust, etc., or a farm business plan. This is a question in the ranking section of an ACEP application, and you get more points if you have this, so we thought we'd just go ahead and require it. We have next, an applicant must have an average adjusted gross income of less than $900,000 for the 3 preceding years. If the applicant is an LLC, all members of the LLC must meet this threshold as well as the LLC itself. This is, again, a federal requirement to receive any federal funds. It doesn't matter which program they're in on that. The minimum size for a property submitted to the ACEP program is 20 acres. And I want to tell you a little bit about why we chose 20 acres. There are a lot of farms that are surrounded by land that's already conserved, and the goal of the program is to do blocks of land and create corridors. So if we can get those 20 acres to complete those corridors, that would be great. We don't know how many of those we'll receive because there's the cost, you know, that the landowner has to bear might not be worth it for 20 acres, but then there may be some who do. So we want to let them have the opportunity to do that. An applicant who is successful in the ACEP program and receives funds must wait 1 application cycle to submit a new parcel application to the county. We felt that was fair. They needed to sit out 1 turn to let other people have the opportunity. And then the building envelope situation. The committee decided that 1 2-acre building envelope will be allowed per 50 acres being placed into conservation. This is pretty much industry standard anyway. So you don't want 10 acres in the middle of a conservation. We wanted 2 acres so that if they're close to their boundary, they've got room if they need to build onto their house or whatever over time. And this is also to allow people who have family members that will continue the farm to allow them to have a space to build. And that's pretty much it. And there's a note at the bottom. All applications must comply with the requirement of the USDA NRCS ACEP ALE program. That's sort of a repetition of some of the other things. We just want to make it clear that, you know, they have to comply with all these things to even be considered going forward. Steve's got a question?
Will you allow them to combine properties?
Yes.
So you got 2 separate pieces, two or three separate pieces of property, and you've got houses or barns where you're going to continue to farm, but you want to take and combine, say, 2 20-acre tracts.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You're allowed to do
This is not parcel specific. So some farmers, as you know, have maybe 6 parcels. Most of them are contiguous. We want to try to keep them contiguous. Like, we'd like for them to be contiguous. We don't want to see 4 parcels right here and 20 miles away is another parcel. So, you know, we have those contiguous parcels. So it's not parcel specific.
Okay.
With farm buildings, any kind of a farm building, whether it's a pole barn, a hay barn, an equipment shed, whatever, there are no restrictions on that in the ASAP or any conservation program. They can build those whenever. We do like for them to notify us so that we're monitoring, not caught off guard and said, oh, look, there's a new barn that we didn't know about. You know, that's just a courtesy for them to notify us. The houses are a different thing. Residences, they have to follow whatever the zoning is. So your minimum 1,200 square foot home. But we do encourage them to place these in logical areas close to the road so there's access so you don't have to do any unnecessary cutting up of the ag land and the productive soils to just put a house.
So the 2-acre building envelope, that's only dwellings?
That's just residences.
Okay.
Only.
Do you have the 7 things that are listed here? What's required now? How does that compare to what's required now?
Carroll County's never had any requirements.
But there are some requirements.
There are many USDA requirements, and we've listed the most important ones here. Some of them don't apply until they're chosen. You know, that's when you get into your ranking and how they rank out, you know, and push the best farms forward.
And the county, as far as I'm aware, we haven't put any more funds into this program.
We have existing funds right now. That is at your will, you know, as we go forward and we bring you applications. The goal, we hope, we're getting a lot of interest right now. I've got about 22 people on the interest list so far. So once we get those applications, we vet them. We rank them. We make sure they've got all their T's crossed and their I's dotted before we get any further. And then we'll rank them, and then we will give them to you to look at the ranking. The higher up they are on the ranking locally, the higher up they'll go at the ranking at the state level. That we're only the first rung, so we've got 2 more hoops to jump after that. But we're seeing so much interest, more than we have in several years.
But is there any more interest on the funding level? I mean, doesn't really.
Well, I think that's going to be if you guys see the interest. You know, if you actually see interest and they are good, you know, they're not they have been objectively rated and they're good. That will be your decision on how many you would like to fund.
Are the percentages remaining the same as far as what portion the county funds versus? Okay.
Yeah, the federal government puts in 50%, the county puts in 25%, and the landowner takes on 25%, which he then gets to use as a deduction on his income taxes. That doesn't really need to change. That's kind of 25 is the max that you see across the country. You don't really see much more than that. Any other questions?
Hey, on the 2-acre building envelope again, is that what you're saying is put there so they can allow a family member to build a house there to continue farming? So there's only one. What if you have 2 kids, I guess? So
if you've got 100 acres, you can have 2.
What if you got 50 acres? You're getting 1 and 1 kid's going somewhere else. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what we hope is the farmhouse that the landowner lives in will be left to 1, and then, you know, and it's to encourage them to encourage their children to continue and give them a space.
On that same topic, Dee, thank you for the work you and the committee are doing, but on the same topic of the housing and so forth, so we see a lot of housing now. It'll be a large tract of land, and then they get a loan for the home, and the bankers want them to cut out 1 acre or 5 acres from that. So how does that fit into this? And what I mean by that is, let's say they cut out 5 acres and they've got a separate loan for that. And I understand you're saying it can be contiguous, but how does that fit in with the requirements here? In other words, maybe only 1 acre around the house is just for the house, and the other 4 acres they've still combined to graze livestock or whatever. They basically interwoven, even though you may have two separate deeds. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So how does that all work out with the dwellings?
Building envelopes are different. They are not sub-parceled out. They are a section within the easement that a dwelling is allowed. There's no need to parcel it out. We haven't seen any real issues in the ones that have used their building envelopes, both with ours that we do privately and a bank, because typically there's some sort of agreement made among family members, with the bank. What we do recommend for people is if they want to give their child 5 acres, they cut that out, sub-parcel that out before they get started, because once you have a conservation easement on your property, it can no longer be subdivided in any way. So a building envelope is not the same thing as parceling out. It's just a segment that you choose ahead of time, saying this is where future building can happen. And they're not always used either. They sort of sit there. We've got some that have never built on their building envelopes. But in that case, if a bank gets involved, say for a building loan, there has to be an agreement worked out among those parties.
Okay. And on item number 4, where you're in, this would rarely even be an issue, but just a hypothetical. So I see under the LLC, you're talking about all the members combined, but when you're talking about an individual applicant, is that directly correlated to the names on the deeds? In other words, if you have a husband and wife that are married, and the guy's a doctor, maybe he makes $800,000, or the lady's a doctor, makes $800,000, and the spouse makes only $100 or $150, you may still be over that $900 threshold. Can there be an individual applicant that's simply applying, or does it have to be correlated to whatever the names are on the deed of the property?
Has to be on the deed of property.
Okay.
So if in that case, they wouldn't qualify if their adjusted gross income is over $900,000. 900,000 above. We haven't had that happen yet in any of ours. So yeah, it's the names on that is why we're really specific on our application. What are the legal names on the deed? So we can go back and check it, because we have to know how many people are involved.
Thank you.
A couple more questions, Dee. If there are other funding entities aside from the county, do we, in fairness, expand number 2 to include those other entities, or just Carroll County? In other words, if a person owed $600,000 in federal taxes, is that okay?
You know what? We'll have to ask the NRCS that question. Yeah, I'll have to ask her that. That's never come up before either. Everybody's been, because when they apply for this adjusted gross income section, if somebody hasn't paid, that's automatically going to knock them out, I would think, because they have to do the adjusted gross income. There's a form they have to go to the FSA and fill out, and this is, like I said, this is not just it's any federal money that they get. If they owe taxes, the FSA is probably going to say, you got to take care of that first before you can go any further.
In number 6, is the one application cycle synonymous with 1 year, or is it longer? No.
Yeah, we won't be submitting, of course, for this year because we're too late. The next cycle that we will be involved in is actually 2026, because October is the cutoff date for 2025. So if somebody is successful in 2026, they will have to wait until 2028 to apply with a new parcel somewhere else, going forward.
That's all.
Y'all are welcome to contact me over the next couple of weeks as you absorb some of this and think about it. I think it's really good that we have a set of requirements up front, because that means we are making our pool of people to pull from really strong, and it cuts out wasted time for people who are not going to meet these requirements.
As an applicant goes through this, will they be able to get a copy of their score sheet referencing the issue that you and I talked about before with the individual? Will he be able to see it?
Their personal one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll be able to know what their score is. We're going to streamline that ranking system. It's going to match the federal government's word for word. So we make sure we're measuring the exact same things that the federal government is going to look at when the application gets to them. We don't want any superfluous stuff in there that has nothing to do with the federal level. So we need to make sure our application matches theirs and the ranking system matches theirs.
Okay.
And the application is 11 pages, but it's clean now. There's plenty of room for them to write, plenty of room to make attachments. It's very simply written now. Anybody can understand the questions.
Great, thank you. And I will add this to the agenda for July the 9th.
Thank you.
So next we have our financial recap for May of 2024. And I'm going to call Alicia Searcy up for us.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We have before us our May 31st, 2024 financial recap. On our revenues, we at the end of May ended up at $75,094,792, and at this point we are about $1.8 million above our budgeted revenue. So we have met our budget, and then we'll add on to that as we go into June. Our expenditures ended the month at $67,869,968, and that's about 92% of budget. Now there are some budget amendments that we've already passed, and those were applied in June, which will adjust that back to where it should be, because we should be at about 91.6% at the end of May. Some of our revenue lines that we're going to go over on in the tax section, motor vehicle taxes will go over budget. Local option sales tax is already over budget. Insurance premium tax is over budget, and our occupational taxes are over budget. So those are some things that are contributing to us being able to meet our revenue budget as quick as we did. On the cash side, we're up over last year about $7.8 million. We brought in about $10 million from our ARPA fund. So if you take the 7.8 that we're up minus from the 10 million, we would actually have a negative cash flow of about 2.16 million. And that's due to some property that we've purchased along the way. On the spliced side, we had a little bit of activity in the 13 spliced. Well, most of all of our activity in that fund was through the LMIG. We spent $333,000 for paving materials for LMIG projects. Then on the 21 spliced, we continue to stay busy on the admin building. We have spent about $281,000 last month. A large portion of that going to the architect who's moving those drawings along and getting us ready to start construction there. And then the fire department at Villa-Rica, or the fire station at Villa-Rica, we spent $221,000 on that, and most of that all went to the general contractor as that project continues to proceed. Machinery and equipment for the fire department, we spent $142,000 there, and those were a majority of our expenditures. For May, we earned about $251,000 in interest in the spliced account.
Just to clarify a couple of those, when you were saying we were over budget, you're technically correct, but also layman's terms, over projected revenues. Someone listening at home might think all those categories, when you think of over budget, you think of spending more, but you were talking about the revenues.
Correct.
Just clarifying that. You weren't incorrect. I was just adding to make sure that point was made.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, Alicia, if you must want to stay up there and do the financial audit, that is next on our list as we move to the business session.
We have for your consideration the audit engagement letter from Rushton. We would like to engage them again this year to do our financial audit for our year ending June 30th, 2024. They have listed the services that will be offered with the engagement, and they've also listed their fees. Their fees for the standard audit are staying the same again this year. I don't believe that their fees have increased since I've been the finance director. So for about 5 years, we've been paying the same for our audit. Now, we've gotten a lot more efficient in how we do things, which has helped them to be more efficient in their audit, and hopefully that's helped to keep their costs down so they could keep our fees the same. They are going up to $8,000 on the single audit. That's the audit that we have to have if we have over $750,000 in federal grants, which we do. And the number of grants have increased by a fair amount over the last few years, and therefore their work on that. But we have to have that single audit if we're over $750,000 in revenue in federal grant money.
Alicia, how many years have we used Rushton now?
Ever since I've been here, and that's 7 years, but I don't know previously to that how many years we've used them.
Typically, I would say, and I have no reason not to be pleased, if you will, with the work of Rushton, and I'm sure they do, as you mentioned, a more and more efficient job and so on. But from the interest of just a pure review, it is generally accepted good practice to not stick with the same firm for several years. I would say 7, 8 years is now teetering on the brink of several. I won't be here, but I would suggest that the team look at possibly a switch in the not too distant future from Rushton to some other entity, just for good business practices. Is just from an auditing perspective is a good thing. So, not to say anything's wrong at all, which it isn't, but it just seems like a good thing to periodically do. And I would say a 7-8 year period is about the time frame.
Well, if it's the pleasure of the board, we will put an RFP out for that next year.
Ms. Cersei, when we first started taking in the ARPA money grants, I know you all and the chairman, everybody was on these Zoom calls trying to learn, and things were changing over time. What can you and what can you not expend the money on? So obviously that was one concern I had, and I said if we had to pay more, I was wanting them to look and maybe give some type of blessing that they thought that we were proceeding correctly. So since we've taken in these federal dollars, it looks like that particular category, I guess, would be covered in this upcoming audit. In other words, ARPA would be a part of that too.
Yes, it has been ever since the start of the ARPA fund. They've audited the specific fund that we have those funds in, and then that's also a part of that single audit.
Okay, thank you.
Are y'all good with putting this on a consent agenda? Okay. All right, I'm now going to call Avery Jackson, the county attorney, and we also have with us here Ann Lee, HR director, and Brad Robinson with the sheriff's office to discuss our next item, the county leave policy updates.
Yes, Chairman and Commissioners, I have the opportunity to present to you something that I think is exciting to HR, me, I think a lot of the county staff, certainly a lot of the department heads, which is a new county leave policy. The county has had its leave policy in effect for many, many years with Some changes or tweaks here or there, usually restrictive caps or things have been put in place. But hopefully this is an opportunity to provide our employees with some flexibility and an opportunity to obtain more leave and then use that leave how they see fit. As you know, this board has taken a big lead in providing our county staff with competitive raises and cost of living raises on a yearly basis over the last couple of years, along with longevity pay, retention pay, and I think the county employees have been very, very excited about all those things. And because we've been able to address, and you have addressed those compensation concerns and issues, now the county staff has had the opportunity to look at the county's leave and benefits policy to see how the county ranked to other jurisdictions and other employers as far as leave and benefits go. So the HR department did a study. They went out and looked at 10 counties in Georgia that are of comparative size to Carroll County. We also looked at the state and what the state of Georgia does, and then some national averages on government employers to see what they provide. And 2 of the 10 counties of our size had a PTO policy, which was intriguing and interesting opportunity. And the HR department looked at what are the benefits of that, what are the pros and cons of that policy. And ultimately, we thought that might be a good opportunity to present to you. And so, working with HR and some department heads and some staff, we came up with a proposal, and you have that proposal in front of you. Again, it's a PTO policy proposal. So instead of having sick, vacation, comp time, personal holiday hours, all these separate categories of hours or time that HR has to track, department heads have to keep up with, employees have to understand, and they all accrue at different rates and they all have different caps. The proposal is to go to one time. It's PTO time, paid time off. You can use that if you're sick or have a vacation, whatever. You don't have to necessarily specify, as long as your manager, supervisor, department head has approved that leave, then you can take that leave, and you no longer have to, if you're sick, you don't have to provide that sick notice from a doctor. One of the biggest benefits that we've heard from the employees that they seem very excited about, and I know HR is excited about, is not having to seek and obtain FMLA leave paperwork after 3 days of sick leave, which was putting a burden on the employees, the department heads, and the HR department to constantly have to obtain that information. But now under the PTO policy, again, it would be only after an extended absence of 2 weeks that you would go to that leave. So having one leave time makes it easier on HR, so they only track one number instead of the 5 different numbers that they're tracking before. It should make it easier on the employees and the department heads. So we hope that that is a lot of flexibility and freedom that we're providing the employees in that regard and how they use time. And with that comes responsibility. And of course, they're going to have to be responsible for their time, and they're going to have to make sure they're banking sick time to use in the future. So there is some responsibility that goes along with that freedom and flexibility that we're trying to provide. So you have before you the proposed leave policy. You have an outline of what the county currently provides, and you see a lot of different types of time and how it accrues differently for different employees and different amounts and different hours. And then below that, you can kind of see what the proposed leave policy is, that, again, all employees 0 to 4 years accrue at the same rate per pay period. All employees 5+ years accrue at the same rate. And the 0 to 4 years, when we did the comparison with, say, the state and the national averages and what everybody else was doing, that was really the area where we saw a deficiency. New employees coming into the county not having enough time or leave. And one particular thing when we were writing and crafting a draft for your consideration is what we heard is that, well, new employees come on board and they accrue time and they don't get to use it until after 6 months. But new employees, when they come on, they have weddings to attend, they have funerals to attend, they may have a vacation already planned when they're hired. They have these things just like everyday employees, and just because they took a new job their life doesn't stop in other areas. So that was one big thing we wanted to address too, is let's have these hours start accruing immediately and have the employees be able to use those so that they can take that time off, so that they're no longer like, well, I can't get hired yet because I got this vacation, or I know I got this wedding or something coming up and I need to wait till that happens so that I can get hired because I know I won't have any time to use for 6 months. So that's part of that flexibility that we wanted to provide in the policy. And again, that's the area where we saw the most, we were not as competitive with other jurisdictions and employers, and so that was the area where there's the largest increase. But we also wanted to provide those 5+ year service employees, try to get them up to what the average is for other employers and jurisdictions. So that's kind of what we did to do that. The second page of the proposal, you'll see, has kind of some bullet points on the current policy. It shows you what the current caps are for the different types of leave and how those are accrued, and then kind of the bullet points on what is the new policy and what are the inner workings of the new policy going to be. Again, we'd hope that it would start for, say, January 2025 calendar year. You kind of have to start at the beginning of a calendar year because that's how you're going to accrue. That's how HR keeps up with the hours based on a calendar year basis. So that would be the starting time. Of course, you're going to have the transition time to get there. We have employees that were hired prior to a certain date that accrue hours a certain way, employees after a certain date that accrue hours a different way currently. And if we're all going to a new proposal, we want to get everybody on the same system. We no longer want to have people grandfathered in under one system, people using another system. If we got one system that works, let's try to get everybody under that one system. Part of that is that some people have accrued balances in excess of our current caps because they're employed under a different one. We need to allow them time to either work down those hours that they've accrued, or we need to be able to pay them out for those hours to get them down to what our current cap is proposed, so that, again, everybody will be starting out under one system. So there is a transition period. And there are certain things that we would like to do during that transition period, like allow employees to take accrued sick leave above the balance as PTO time between January 1 and December 31st, so that way they can get some of those accrued balances down. And then if there's excess time at the end of that, then we would propose to pay that time down to the caps that we're proposing. What we're kind of looking at too, we want to encourage employees to use time. We don't want employees banking all their time. We want to provide them this time. We want them to have the leave so they come back and they're refreshed and they're ready to work. And we think that employees need that time off. So part of the proposal, and this is a small tweak from what you might have first been sent after discussions and hearing feedback and things. This is, the only small thing that we've discussed and said, hey, that is a good idea. Maybe we need to add that to the proposal. But that's just that we'd like to have those employees at least use 108 of their PTO time that they'll be getting, so that that they're actually using that time. They're not just coming to work, getting burnt out and banking all that time, that they're taking time off, they're taking a vacation, they're using their sick time. So we'd like to encourage them to use the 108 hours and require at least 108 hours to be used. And then after that, they can bank any of the excess hours that they have if they don't want to use them. If they want to use them, they can use those hours. Of course, there will be some responsibility on them to reserve a certain amount in case they're sick and stuff. So you want to have them to be able to reserve and build up that balance so that if they have any illnesses or leave time that they need to take for, or extended leave time, they'll have that balance built up. So they may bank and accrue additional hours over that. Well, I guess at the end of each year, if the employees have accrued PTO time above the 640 cap, which we're proposing, which again, we took the current cap of vacation of 160 hours and the current cap of sick leave, 480 hours, and combined those to 640 hours since we're combining the leave. So at the end of each year, if the employees have accrued leave over this balance, instead of losing those hours as currently is occurring with our employees that are employed after 2014 and we're under the new sick leave cap, if they don't get sick, they show up to work every day and don't use their sick time, then they've been losing hours. So instead of losing hours, we would propose to pay those hours in excess of 150 hours, again, because we want to encourage them to at least take some minimum. But we would pay those hours above 150 hours at the rate of 50% of the employee's hourly rate. So again, if they use the time, they get 100% of it. Again, we'd like for them to do that, but we understand there's some employees that just may not want to use the time and may want to show up to work, and they need some reward for being employees that show up every day. And instead of just losing that time, there's some compensation that can be provided to them for that. Also upon...
Oh, I'm sorry, you took a breath, so I was going to interrupt.
Yes.
So earlier you said from January to December 31st, in this first part from July 1st, 2024
Yes.
to December 31st, 2024 is we're working to get everybody back equal on January the 1st.
Yes.
So we've got the 6 months where we're going to need people to be taking time off and using some of their paid time off.
Yes.
And then it'll start next year, the full year, the 1st through the December.
Yes.
You made the comment January. I didn't want any employees thinking it doesn't start till this January and they have a whole nother year to get, use up all their time and they'll get paid this January 2025.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you took a breath, so I thought I would backtrack.
Absolutely. And we understand that employees with these significant accrued balances, they're not going to be able to use all their time. They may not be able to use half their time. Maybe they'll be able to use a quarter of their time or something. They'll be able to take a little bit of their time, whatever they can work out with their supervisors or managers and works with their schedule. And then again, we'll buy down the time that's remaining after that time. And that is sick time that they would not have gotten paid for before under the old system. That's whether they were prior to 2014 employees and have significant accrued balances, they weren't getting paid for it. Afterwards, they weren't getting paid for it, but they were losing it. But the proposal is to provide them something that they weren't receiving before, which is pay down their time at 50 cents on the dollar. Part of the proposal would be to get rid of the donated leave program. Under the proposal, we think based on what other employers provide and other jurisdictions provide, that we are providing now a competitive amount of leave to our employees. So now they have that leave. Also, since we're paying people at 50 cents on the dollar for excess leave, you're going to have people less likely to pay into the donated leave program. So we think we're providing enough leave. Employees aren't going to have that incentive to, they have incentive to either use their own leave or to get paid for their leave. So it just seems like the program naturally would go away. So it made sense to just say, hey, we need to just stop it because it's not going to move forward after this point anyways. Also, comp time is one of those issues, like we said, there's all these different times that are tracked differently by different departments or different employees. Comp time is one of those where some employees could choose comp time, some employees could choose overtime, and it would be based on their department and department head and managers' preference along with their own preference. And it was, it may have been a crutch kind of because, again, we didn't have the amount of vacation time provided to the employees that other people had. Again, now we're providing that time. We don't think that comp time is as necessary as it might have been. We would like to pay those employees out overtime when they accrue that. We'd still like them to be able to use comp time within their pay period, provide flexibility to them and their employers. If somebody comes in, has to stay late one day, maybe they don't come in until an hour later the next day, or if they had to stay late on Monday, maybe they leave early on Friday. But they can work it out as more of flex time with their supervisors and managers and department heads, whatever works in their area. But if they accrue it on the paycheck, then we're going to pay them for that overtime, rather than having accrued comp time balances build up over time, and having people track comp time in different ways or using it in different ways. Again, it just makes sense to, instead of having accrued liabilities, let's pay those out as the employee earned the overtime, let's pay them the overtime. And they should have more than enough leave under the new policy. If they want to take a vacation stuff, they can take a vacation. They don't necessarily need the comp time. Also, let's see, one of the things too is that looking at the holidays, I think all the places that were researched had holidays that at least had 10, 11, 12, even the state had like 13 holiday days. The county had 9.5 holidays, so we were on the very low end of that. So looking at all the holidays everybody had, the one common one was Veterans Day that the county did not have. So the proposal would be to add Veterans Day as a permanent county holiday to match what the state does and what 90% of the other counties that were researched also do. Let's see, like I said, FMLA paperwork was a big thing. Now you don't have to provide that until there's an extended absence, which is you've been out for 2 weeks, and then you would have to fill out the FMLA paperwork at that time. While you're on an extended absence, if it's, whether it's for any type of that family medical leave or workers' comp leave, some type of that extended absence, you would not continue to accrue additional PTO time, and you wouldn't be eligible for any bonus, retention, or longevity or other pay at that time. Pay that's, when you're working, you're eligible for that pay, and if you're at work and you're here, you're also eligible to continue to accrue. But if you're not for a long time, then we didn't think that it would be necessary for you to be eligible for those as the people that are here at work, coming to work every day. Also, while you're on extended leave, you're required to exhaust that PTO time. Use that PTO time to give you 100% of your pay. That's what it's there for. When you're on extended leave, we want you to be receiving that paycheck. And we also want you to come back at the end of that extended leave. But sometimes that extended leave extends out further. The county provides benefits for that, short-term disability and long-term disability policies. If you're going to be out for significant amounts of times past 13, 16 weeks of time, then we can be moving you to short-term disability, long-term disability, other programs that the county offers, but we want you to use down your PTO time for that benefit. I think that is most of the proposal I have, and if Ann or Brad think of anything that I've missed, y'all can speak up. I know the HR department has been working on this for a number of months and has spent an exhaustive amount of time researching, looking at the policies, the language, what tweaks we could make to the current policies, and what changes are good, bad, pros and cons, and just a lot of research and thought has gone into the different things. And I know the Sheriff Department has been very active in also looking at those issues and how practical some things are or may not be, and how they would work in practice. And so I think together, everybody put their heads together and came up with a very good proposal for your consideration. If you have any other questions or concerns, I'm glad to answer those.
Mr. Jackson, thank you for the presentation, for you and Human Resources and Sheriff's Department, all the other departments that contributed. I guess I've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments. First of all, I think the overall idea of the PTO is a good idea. I think the system to move in this direction, not having to keep up with vacation and sick necessarily in two separate categories, I think is a good thing. We're also basically increasing from 480 up to 640 hours maximum that could be rolled over, if that's correct. So that's obviously a benefit for the employees. And I understand in the HR department, them not having to keep up with all the paperwork, as you talked about with FMLA, not having to have that paperwork after 3 days, all that would be beneficial on both sides. And so to address the comp time, so the comp time as we know it would be discontinued, but in layman's terms, there could still be some flex time that the department head would have the ability to grant the employee, but those would not count toward payable hours, if you will. Is that the distinction?
Yes, that's correct. If they use that flex time within that pay period, then that's not payable hours. If they're unable to use flex time during that pay period, then we'll pay them overtime for those hours as required.
And an example of that would be like Public Works. You know, we have a big storm come through and they have to work all night through the next day. They would then get a flexible time because, one, they're probably exhausted. And so they get a flexible time instead of just tallying it up over here, and then 6 months later, one of them says, I need this time, 2 months later, someone needs that. So trying to use that flexible time, it mostly would be like Public Works with when we have, you know, storms and things that come through. There's probably a few departments that run into some things. Finance department has a crunch certain times of the year getting their paperwork done. The tax assessor has certain time crunches. You know, the tax commissioner, where she's trying to get things out come September. So there's just a few areas that departments would run into comp time issues. So that's why we said it should be more of a flex time. They go ahead and take the time off.
But on the contrary, on the flip side of that, though, that does have the capability of being able to increase overtime budgets in some of the departments as well.
Yes,
that would be another caveat that you need to consider on the opposite side of that. And I'm not saying that this isn't good. I'm just saying that is something to consider. There's only so much flex time, if you will, that you can apply. Other things, you know, you can't. If they work so many hours, you can't just let them off that many hours if you don't have enough people to fill the positions in the department, such as public safety.
That's correct, yes. And there are certain departments that have never had flex time, more of your administrative departments that certainly have to work and stay late many times. But as you said, they would need some overtime in their budget. They've never had overtime in their budget, but they would need that too. We also think that department heads might watch it a little. Comp time is one of those things that doesn't hit their budget, right? It's just a number that's tracked, and so it's given more freely. If you have a overtime budget and you know what you're budgeted for, you're going to watch that closely because you're not going to want to go over budget in that category. So I think department heads and employees will look more closely about it at that.
Okay. And so as far as the 640, which would be ultimately the ultimate maximum hours that could be rolled over, and I guess that's at 5+ years, you're looking at 258 is a maximum they could earn per year. So you're requiring them to physically take the 108 hours or to lose it per se, either way, in a calendar year or in a fiscal year. So but the remaining balance, they obviously can roll over, as just stated. They're not being forced to take the payout annually. They're only being forced to take those hours down to a certain number.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
They can use those hours if they, and they'll get 100% if they do, so it's beneficial for them to use those hours.
Okay. Two areas that I have a little bit of deeper thought on. One is the probationary period, the 6-month probationary period. So my understanding is the current policy, they start with the ability to start accruing hours from day one, but they don't have the eligibility to take that until after the 6-month period.
That's correct.
And it's what, 60 days, 2 months, that's the insurance that you have to be here before you're eligible for?
First of the month following 60 days.
Okay, so essentially 60 days. So in my mind, part of the probationary period is you want the employee to show up, you want to see how they work, you want to see are they going to be a good fit for the next 6 months, and hopefully that will tell what type of employee they'd be moving forward. You're exactly right about weddings, vacations, and different things, but I do think there's a balance, and maybe the balance is they're only earning so many hours in the first 6 months that they can even take, period. But I don't know that on day one that I've got to do this, and this. Well, no problem. I mean, I think there's a difference in someone being allowed to do that and be gainfully employed, but being allowed to do that and they're paid for all that too. And I'm all about the employees, but I'm all about seniority and building time and different things with the county as well. And I'm not even saying that I'm against that. I'm just simply saying that that's something to consider. Are we willing from day one, if they want to start doing all these things and they're going to get paid for it, is that something we're okay with, when the idea of a 6-month probationary period is to see that employee as much as possible to see are they going to be a good fit for the job that they're in?
Absolutely, and that's a very good point. And just because you have the leave doesn't mean you can automatically take it. You have to get approval from your supervisor, manager, department head, whoever you report to. And I think in that probationary period, your department heads are going to be looking at that a lot closer. While a 5-year employee may say, hey, I need to take off, and they know that that's a good, yeah, go ahead and take off. If it's a brand new employee, they might be like, well, what do you need to take off for? And if it's again, wedding, funeral, having a baby, something like this, like the department head, manager, supervisor say, yeah, that sounds fine, take off. But if it's for something less important, then they might say, no, you can't, we're not going to allow you to use your time like that. You're a probationary employee and you need to come here. Like I said, we provide a lot of flexibility in this, and with that comes responsibility, and part of that's on the department heads to make sure that they're allowing it when necessary and how it should be taken. And part of that's on the employees
Sure.
as well. That is a very good point. And you're right that they really don't, the first pay period, they're going to accrue 7 hours. So they've worked 2 weeks. They can't even take a whole day off yet.
Right.
So they're not really going to accrue that enough
Right.
time to take off too
Right.
much time.
Exactly. So on the donated leave program, I've really got mixed emotions about this. So the current policy, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this has been a lot of information to take in that you all have been working on. So the current program, there's essentially no limit on how much can be donated to a singular employee. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So we're going from, to me, one extreme, there's never been a cap, to now all of a sudden you can't have anything. And part of this program is, through your presentation today, is we want to encourage employees to take off. We want to encourage employees to use their time. But it's kind of like your personal finances, right? You want to live for today, but you also have to plan for tomorrow. So I know it's a balance. But if we're telling employees, hey, take this time off, it's yours, don't necessarily expend all of it, but please take the time. But in the same note, no one's going to know 3 years from now or 3 months from now they're going to get cancer or they're going to get whatever. And I understand, I guess after 12 weeks, we probably should move them into long-term disability. But my point is, for anything in between there, maybe they are a good employee, maybe they've tried the best to manage, but they had this illness that come up. So I would like for us to possibly consider tying something back into the FMLA, which I think is 480 hours that's required by law. Is that correct? Approximately 12 weeks.
Yes.
So if they had 240 available, and we wanted to allow them to reach that maximum at 480, maybe they could have 240 hours donated. I'm not saying that has to happen, I'm just saying that's a suggestion, because to me, I feel like we're going from one extreme, there's no cap, to now we're completely taking it away. You can have good employees, you can have employees that have showed up. By what we're asking them to do, please take time. No one's promised tomorrow, and then an illness comes along. And yes, after 12 weeks, you go into a total different category of needing to go into long-term disability, but anything less than that, I don't know that we should not allow them to possibly have donated leave. And then my only other comment on this, like I'll reiterate again, I think overall this is a very good program. I think ultimately it's going to be beneficial for the employees. It's going to help internally, I think, with cutting down on a lot of different paperwork with the departments. But I would really like to see, if this is approved by the board, there be some type of mandatory training, and I'm sure that would happen through the chairman or HR, but HR, if they're having to sit and take in all this information to process through a paycheck, that they are the ones that has disseminated out to department heads, supervisors, whoever, okay, this is how this works, this is what you do in this situation, because what I don't want to happen is you've got 100 employees in one department. And I understand public safety is going to operate a little bit different because they're 24/7 than some of the other 8-hour, so to speak, positions. But I don't want to hear 3 months into this, and I know this will be a work in progress, that you've got, well, gosh, we've got a department head over here doing all this, this, and this, and they're still accruing hours. They're going to get paid 50 cents on the dollar if they don't take them. And you've got another department head that has done what they thought by the book, and I'm not saying one department head would be doing anything fictitious. I'm just saying if they didn't necessarily understand the mode of every possible scenario, how they should be calculating or turning that in. So I do think that's something that is very important, to have something written out and a training that has to fall back, that HR has disseminated whatever information, and they know how to calculate that and return that back in. And then also, if this is something that's approved, I think we don't need to wait a year. I think within 6 months, I think there ought to be a presentation back to the board to say, hey, here's all the great things that are working, here's 1 or 2 things that aren't, and here's 1 or 2 things that we've either tweaked administratively or we need the board to change the policy. I think 6 months is a good time frame just to report back to say, how are things moving along? So those are my comments.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Next. Hello, Avery.
Hey.
First of all, whoever came up with this last page of benchmarks with other counties and the state and all that, thank you. That's useful information. Give some, good data for comparative measure. Now, I'm in pretty much full agreement with this. We've discussed it. I've relayed that thought to you, but I think it will simplify things and is a good thing. I just had a couple questions. The 640 hours, as I understand it, just to make sure I'm interpreting this right though, that employees may accrue and bank any additional unused hours each year up to a cap of 640 hours. Is that 640 hours per year? In other words, does it roll from year to year? So if I'm an employee, I have 640 hours in 2025, and then because I think, man, I could get cancer, or I know my child's going in for Lyme disease treatment or whatever for the next 6 months, I want to accumulate all I can, and can I roll over then the 640 hours and accrue 400 more hours the next year, or is 640 the cap, period? No.
So 640 would be the reserve cap. That's your accrued balance that carries over from year to year. So let's say a new employee comes on board. They're going to get 184 hours. We want them to use 108 hours. They have 6 hours that they put in the bank. After 6 years, they've built up a balance to 640. 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it may be, they built up that balance. By that time, they're also moved into the next category where they're getting 258 hours, so they're getting more hours. So they're going to have a balance at the beginning of the year at 640. During that year, they're going to get 258 hours, and any
900.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And again, at that point, we want them to be using some of that time, 110 hours, because we're going to be paying out anything up to 150 hours at the end of that year. So if they used 110 hours and they had 150 hours over the 640 cap, then we would pay down that 150 hours to the 640 cap. So it's at the end of the year cap, and then that's what you roll over to the next year.
Okay, so they can accumulate more than 640, because the 640 equates, I mean, roughly to 4 months.
Yes.
And so what I'm after here, the overall theme is, do we have something for the benefit of employees? I mean, having been through this myself with a family member, Lyme disease treatment, which was a long and tumultuous deal. So that dovetails with things like short-term disability, family medical leave, so on, which is the same kind of theme as what Clint was touching on. I just want it mathematically to dovetail with other benefits, so that we don't wake up one day and find that an employee is in a situation where they can only accumulate X hours, but before some other benefit kicks in, we have a 90-hour gap or something that puts them in a devastated situation. So does it dovetail, I guess, is my basic question.
Yep. So first I'll tell you how the 640 came about. It's the vacation and the sick time combined. We combined both of those, but also we looked at it, what would we want it to be anyways, because we're like, we could adjust it, up or down from that. And so how did we come up with that? We said Family Medical Leave Act gives you 12 weeks. So that's 12 weeks. You don't have to fill out that paperwork under our new system till after 2 weeks extended leave. So add 2 weeks on the front end, then you have the 12 weeks, and then we said, you have situations, and we'll give you 2 weeks after that. So 16 weeks total, 640 hours. That's how we came up with that. After that time, it's like, well, that's a long, significant time, and the county needs to be making a determination, and you need to be making a determination. Can you come back, or where are we at? And that's when those disability policies would kick in. As to when those kick in, I'll let Ann answer, when the short-term policy kicks in and when the long-term policy kicks in, because I know she knows those off the top of her head.
And are both of those elective policies that an employee pays for, or do we just offer that? I don't participate in the county benefits, so I don't know. Sorry about that, but.
Thank you, Chairman and the Commissioners, for allowing us to be here. It is an elective policy for employees to purchase the short-term disability policy. They're offered that when they come through orientation. They also can apply for it at open enrollment every year. Long-term disability is a policy that the county pays for. And after an employee has been out of the workplace for an extended period of time, we would make application for the employee. So that is a benefit that the county is paying for each employee now. The short term is the employee's choice. So if someone purchased the short term covers 12 weeks, and then it rolls directly into long term. So it would behoove our employees to purchase the short term, and we do have a lot of employees that do so. But then you also have a lot of employees that have a lot of sick time, so they did not see a need to purchase that short-term policy because they had their own sick and vacation time that could cover that short-term period.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does the 12 weeks have to be the first 12 weeks, or can it be?
I'm sorry?
Does the short-term disability 12-week period have to be the first 12 weeks, or can it be on into after?
Employees purchase short-term, and it can be a 7-day or a 14-day. So if an employee purchases 7-day, on the 8th day, short-term would start paying 60%. If they purchase the 14, it would be on the 15th day.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the shorter the period, the employee pays more for the policy. So what employees usually do is purchase the 14-day.
Okay. I think that's good. I just didn't want folks to be in some gap situation. And that would be, you know, a rare occurrence, but still, when you're in that occurrence, it's a devastating situation, so.
I think you have to be out of work for 90 days for the long-term to kick in.
It'd be the 12 weeks. If
Mhm.
someone's out on the 13th week, it would be.
That's okay.
Have you received any feedback from the employees on this policy?
We have. We've received a lot of good feedback from a lot of department heads and employees. We've received comments and concerns. As you know, it's a lot of information to throw out. And as we've sat down and talked with various people, I think, and they understand and wrap their minds around it, I think they've gotten more excited about it. But you have, I think the most excited group of employees are those employees that that are really diligent about tracking their own time and basically, you know, I only use sick time if I'm, you know, deathly ill and something happens, and so they are more those employees that do and currently behave like that. They're more than ecstatic to be receiving, again, this flexibility and freedom to bank the time if they want to, and a lot of them want to because, you know, they're planning in case they have something. But then once they get to banking whatever they think is appropriate, then they have the flexibility to use what they want when they want without having to show doctor's notices or things like that. And so again, I think a lot of those employees have really, you know, embraced that concept and are very excited about it. There are some, I mean, anytime you're making a change like this, I understand, you know, people are going to be scared, and, you know, people absolutely don't want to lose something if they're getting something, and I don't think we tried very, very hard to make sure that nobody was losing anything, that everybody was gaining something, or yeah, nobody was losing under the system, and we're providing things that the employees didn't have before. So again, I think as we've explained that, I think it's gotten better. But certainly, there's some people that that may not like the new system. They may like the old system better. But I think overall, the vast majority we've heard good things about.
I like the caps because one thing, we know where our financial liability is. We know what it is. We don't know now, because lots of times the department head keeps those hours and we get them at one time and you don't really know. So this will limit our liability.
We certainly hope that's the case, and that was part of the planning strategy for it. Yeah.
I got a couple questions, and maybe for Brad, if he could. As far as Commissioner Chance touched on just a little bit, but as far as your overtime budget, how do you think that affect that if you have these employees taking off a good bit of time between July and December? Do you think that's going to be an issue for you?
I'm going to say, looking at our roster, the amount of employees that's got the most time are going to be in a position that we can make that happen without overtime.
Okay.
I feel real good about the policy. I like it, the fact that it's standardized. Employees are gaining the same amount of time, whether they're 8, 12, 24 hours. I really feel good about it. The one comment, Commissioner Chance, you made about employees start to gain hours from the start. Actually, the reason that we thought about that is we've got some employees that come to work and been there 3 months and can't take a day off, then they have a funeral. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a vacation. But if they have a family member that passes away, they have the ability to take the day off and get paid. So That was what I was thinking about there. Yeah, if they start abusing it, they won't make probation. I promise.
And overall, I do like this plan. I do like it standardized. Coming back from
Right.
when I worked for them, man, it's a lot simpler. But the other question I got for you, so as far as your 12-hour employees and even the 24-hour employees in the fire department,
Right.
you think the time is going to be okay as far as, say, if they have to take 3 days off, they're taking 36 hours. A fireman's going to be taking, if he takes 3 days off, he's taking a lot more time off than the average 8-hour guy. So you think it's going to work out and you don't see an issue there?
I think it works out in the wash. If I need a week off, I'm taking 40 hours myself. I can argue for any department, for and against.
Yeah,
But overall, I think this is the fairest policy, and I appreciate the work
absolutely.
that these folks have done.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great plan myself, the way it's set up.
I'd like to address your donated leave, and Ann, you probably don't have the answer now, so you get it to us maybe by the middle of next week. Really, in the last 2 years, how many employees have requested donated leave? Because we all get the email. I haven't seen that many coming through. And then the next thing is, how many of our employees really, jump to their aid? I mean, because sometimes, it's just their problem is usually bigger than what a little bit of donated time can help with. So I think that was part of the thing too. It was just another time tracker, and it wasn't something that was a regular occurrence. Yeah, if you have the answer now, if you can, but if not, I mean, I know I'm just throwing this out all of a sudden at the last minute, but I felt like along the way we just don't see that as much.
I'm glad you brought it up because I do want to talk about the donated leave. There are some employees that I know that they've got things coming. They've got serious sickness. These are the people that are going to be hurt because through the last few years they have exhausted all of their time. Are there a lot of people that donate time? There are. And when we first implemented the donated leave policy, what we wanted it to do is if you saw your coworker abusing time, you wouldn't donate time to them. I've only seen that happen one time in 23 years. Because if you like your coworker, even though they may be abusing and they may have taken all of their time, they get sick, your coworkers feel bad for them, and they'll donate time. So it does happen. I do have some people out that right now that are receiving donated time. There are some situations that I know that's coming up that people are going to rely on people to donate time. Do I really think under this new proposal that there will be a lot of people that will donate time? I don't think so. But there could be. If you look at your friend and they've got a serious condition happening, they've got a situation with their family, there could be somebody. So I guess I'm saying that, do we take that totally away? Or do we rewrite the donated leave policy that there is a little bit stricter and we put a cap on it? And that's what we probably should have done when the donated leave was first implemented. But we didn't put a cap between your own time and what you could receive as donated time. So I'm just, that's a concern of mine is on the donated time because I'm aware of some situations that are going on. But as far as the proposal, I like it. I think everyone has done a tremendous job on this presentation, this proposal. So I'm hoping that for the majority of it, that we can have all of your support.
Let me ask Ann, so to Michelle's question then, on roughly, don't need a precise figure, but is it 100 or about 5 or what that would have been?
It's less than 10. There's not a lot of people out right now. I've got people out on workers' comp. I have people out on FMLA, but it's not a handful of people.
My point would be, if the lower the number, I think is the more reason for us to offer it. And the reason I'm saying that is when they hit a serious illness,
Yeah.
and you've not, even if maybe you have planned, but you don't have that many hours to accommodate, and I know I'm being able to speak for you, you and your department is the one that would have to do the paperwork, but my point is, if it was 100, you may say, well, that's even a greater need, but that's even that much more of a burden on the department. But if you're able to offer something that's not really costing the county money per se, or you're not, like I said, you're going from one extreme, no cap, those that need it, to now you're going to completely do away with it. If you've only got 4 or 5 that need it, those 4 or 5 that have cancer, those 4 or 5 that have a serious illness, that may be a big deal to them. With also understanding not only that there's a cap, but after about 12 weeks, they're going to need to be moved out on long-term disability anyways. So I guess my point is, the lower the number, I would think even more the reason to add an additional security blanket, if you will, for the employee to help them if others want to donate, and then it's not that huge of a burden. I mean, and only you can speak to, I don't know what all paperwork goes into that, but I'm just saying it's another way to add an additional compensation or an opportunity to help an employee. And I think we all have a heart for someone with sickness, serious sickness or cancer or something that no one can help. It has nothing to do with you being a good employee or not. So that was my only reason for thinking that we could tie that back into the FMLA number and cap it. And
My department does not have a problem in continuing the donated leave program. We just need to clean the language up and change the way that we're processing now. I would rather you look at doing that than to totally take it out of the picture. When we solicit for time, there's no guarantee that people are going to donate time anyway. So at least we're soliciting time, asking people if they don't want to, they will not. But I'm more than willing to keep that on the table just because no one asked to get sick. And sometimes things happen that we go out of the workplace. So I'm open to however you want to vote on it, but in my opinion, I think it would be a good item to keep in there and just clean the language up.
Do you want to present that language? I mean, I know next week is a holiday week, and I don't know who's taking off in your department, who's not. Is there a time that we could take care of this with the July 9th meeting? Is there a way to send to us what your department would like to see donated time cleaned up?
I've talked a little bit to Avery about it I think yesterday, didn't I? And I really think that all that needs to be added is right now, it's kind of open-ended. And so what I would suggest that we do is between your own time and donated leave, that the maximum amount that you could receive would be a max of $480.
Okay.
And I think that's what's missing today, is because it doesn't say. So if someone, we do require someone to exhaust all of their time before they can seek donated leave. So right now, the way the program's written is they can exhaust all of their time, but then they can ask for donated time, and it's infinity.
Right, okay.
So if we put a cap between the two entities, I think would probably fix that, don't you?
And I think that also shores up with the FMLA. It's not allowing ambiguity in the workplace of needing to have them go on to long-term disability, right? If there's unlimited, donated leave. So if it's tying back to that federal minimum standard of the 12 weeks, I just think that it allows us to provide something for the employees, but it still cleans up. It doesn't allow something to keep going on, but then it's kind of in contradictory of how many weeks that you're having to guarantee.
Well, it would clean it up in that about halfway when someone's out of the workplace, we would make application for long-term disability. Certainly if the employee returned, the application would just become null and void. But at least we would get the process so that the long-term would already be in place before the 12 weeks stops. And so we wouldn't have that period of time. A lot of times employees will go out of the workplace and they keep calling. They'll say, I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back next week. And then next week, I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back next week. So what we're doing is continuing donating time. Even when an employee is out of the workplace, they are responsible for all of the deductions that belong to them. So a lot of times, if you say that you're going to, somebody's going to go out of the workplace, we still want to have a way so that we can collect those deductions that they are responsible for. So I just think it would be cleaner. It would tie back into the 480 hours. Do I think people will donate a lot of time? Probably not, but at least we still have that on the table.
So I'm good with, if the other commissioners are, like I said, I'm not going to put this on consent because it is a lot to absorb. And we have gone over with many of the elected officials. We've gone over many of the department heads, and they're, again, wanting to make sure that today, whatever changes were made, they knew that on Monday, it was a draft at that point. So if we could, I think at this point, just update the donated leave program is capped at 480 instead of abolished. And then over the next week, y'all have time to really think about it some more too, and I have a chance to hear back from the department heads if there's anything else they heard today they thought was different from what they heard on Monday for some feedback. So I'm not going to ask for this to be on a consent agenda, so we will have time to think about it a little bit longer. So at this time there's nothing else, because I will add the application for the ACEP ALE program as the third item, but we've already discussed that during the initial part of the work session. And we will have an executive session following our board meeting or in the process of the July 9th meeting to discuss real estate. So at this time, I'm going to adjourn the work session.